Pawcast today. I'm your host, Dr. Roberta Westbrook, and we are here at the Campus for All Animals, the Houston SPCA. Thank you for joining us. So today we are going to give you a lot of helpful information about pet nutrition. You know, it seems like there's always something changing in the world of pet nutrition and things that we should be aware of and concerned about with our foods and what they're putting into their bodies, because it's so important. Food gives them energy, gives them life, gives them sustainability. And so we want to make sure that you have some information to help you decide what sorts of nutrients your pet needs on a daily basis. So think of some questions that you'd like to have me answer during our show today, and hopefully I can help you out while you're thinking of those questions. I do want to introduce you to our wonderful pet of the week today. Her name is Piper. And Piper is a wonderful dog that came to us about a month ago. She is looking for a new home. Piper is super sweet. She loves to play. She loves to give kisses. She loves belly rubs, as you can see. Very easygoing. She is going to make someone a wonderful family pet. She's about 5 years old, and we have her as a shepherd mix with maybe some Basenji in there. So Piper is really an adorable pet. So come on down and visit her. You know, our adoption center is open daily from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. There's no appointment necessary. You can come on in, bring your family, bring your friends, make a day of it. Visit with our cats and dogs and puppies and kittens and see if there's a pet that you feel like is going to fit into your family just perfectly and find the forever home. So we're happy to have you come on down to our campus this weekend, and we're looking forward to it. So let's start off by talking about pet nutrition. So, you know, I have behind me lots of different diets here from Hill's Pet Nutrition, and there's lots of wonderful diets out there that we can feed our pets. And so I'm going to talk about just some basics. For example, when you get a new pet, what do you think about when you think about what types of food that you need to feed your pet? There's a lot to consider. One of the things that you want to consider is your lifestyle. So it's a great idea to consider buying a commercialized, balanced, nutritionally balanced pet food for your pet, such as Hill's Science Diet Food. It's what we feed all of our shelter pets here. Helps us to save thousands of lives every year. And commercially made pet food, the kind of dry kibble that you see here, and even some of the canned foods that you can see here, can be very beneficial for pets, mainly because it's already been tested, it's already been approved for use for your pet's particular life stage. So, for example, when you're choosing a pet food, like we have Hill's Pet Nutrition here, on the side of the pet food bag, you want to make sure that the pet food, Piper is already excited to see this, but you want to make sure that the food has what's called an AAFCO statement, an AAFCO statement. The AAFCO statement tells us that this food is nutritionally adequate for whatever life stage your pet is in. So for example, this is senior vitality. This is for geriatric pets, pet cats. And so this food has been specially formulated for cats that are older, because as you know, just like people, as animals age, their nutritional requirements change. So the nutritional requirements for a puppy or a kitten are going to be very different from a middle-aged dog or cat and from a geriatric or older dog or cat. And so when you're looking at the different types of foods and you're looking at the particular life stage, like senior or puppy, the AAFCO statement tells us that that food is nutritionally adequate for that particular life stage. So that's one place to start. Does anybody have any questions about food for their pet?
Yeah, so somebody's asking, so what are the signs if your dog has food allergies?
Oh, that's a great question. So let's say you purchase a food that you want to start your new pet on. The first thing to do is to recognize what is a food allergy. How would you even know that there might be a food allergy? Well, veterinarians, we tend to look at adverse food reactions as kind of a broad umbrella, an adverse food reaction. And then under the umbrella of adverse food reactions, we tend to break it down into a food allergy versus a food intolerance. So sometimes when you feed your pet something that he or she shouldn't eat, you might notice stomach upset, vomit, or diarrhea. Those tend to be what we call food intolerances. It's very similar to when we as people eat something that doesn't agree with us, and we may have tummy upset from that. So that's food intolerance. Food allergies in dogs and cats tends to be more chronic. Food allergies are related to the pet's immune system creating an allergic response to a particular ingredient in a food. And food allergies tend to present themselves, shockingly enough, as skin and ear problems. When we think of allergies, we often think of sneezing, and we often think of, respiratory disease. But food allergies in pets typically present as skin and ear infections, itching, rubbing of the face, licking at the paws, maybe chewing at the area around the anus underneath the tail, the armpits, and the inguinal areas on the inside of the thighs. These are common areas for pets to lick, to scratch, to become red and irritated if they have a food allergy. So if you're noticing this in your pet, what you want to do is get your pet to the veterinarian right away. They are going to help you determine whether or not this is a food allergy. Second, your veterinarian may recommend, if they do think it's a food allergy, to try a different food. So they may try to figure out what type of food your pet is allergic to, and they may try to do that by putting your pet on a specific diet. And so you can see some of those here. Some of the diets that we have here are for animals that have skin or food sensitivities that need to be on a special diet because they may be allergic to an ingredient in the normally prepared foods. Yeah. This one is a very common one. So it says skin and food sensitivity. So this is a prescription diet that your veterinarian can help to prescribe if your veterinarian feels like your pet has a food allergy. And it's very interesting. Oftentimes what's done is the most common thing that pets are allergic to in foods are the proteins in foods. And so a lot of what these foods do is they still have protein in them, and they still have very beneficial protein in them, but they're broken down into very, very tiny parts so that your pet's immune system doesn't recognize it as an allergen. And that way your pet still gets the protein he or she needs, but they don't have the reactions to go along with it.
Perfect. So a follow-up question to Mari was, basically people have heard about the grain-free diets. Should they switch to that grain-free, or will that help with food allergies, or what are kind of the basic information about grain-free diets?
Yes, we've heard a lot about grain-free diets over the last few years, and it's very important that you consult with your family veterinarian about whether or not your pet needs a grain-free diet. Grains can be perfectly fine for most pets, so unless your veterinarian has diagnosed your pet with a grain allergy and recommends a grain-free diet, I would say do not consider feeding your pet a grain-free diet. Your pets can do really well on formulated diets. The issue with a grain-free diet is that over the last few years, there has been some correlation between the development of heart disease and the feeding of grain-free diets. So we do not want to feed a grain-free diet unless your pet absolutely needs it, and we may want to make sure that if your pet is on a grain-free diet, that he or she is not missing essential amino acids necessary for adequate heart function. So please contact your family veterinarian about the grain-free diet.
So speaking of, heart diseases, heart failure, Mary is asking, her pet does have heart issues. So is there a different option for him right now? It's on like farmer's dog for a few years, but is there a specific diet for pets with heart failure?
So I would certainly talk to your veterinarian about what types of diets might be most appropriate. With animals with heart disease, we typically want to watch fluid retention, or foods that are going to cause fluid retention, because fluid retention can actually put more stress and load on the heart. I want to make sure that the nutrients and the amino acids in your pet's food are there to support heart health. So I would say contact your family veterinarian for the appropriate diet because there isn't maybe just one specific diet. There may be options based on what's best for your pet's individual health condition.
Another question is, what is the safest way to introduce a pet to new food?
Yes, great question. How do you introduce your pet to new food? Always introduce your pet to a new food very gradually. So changing your pet's food quickly, for example, feeding one type of food for months and then one day deciding, I'm going to try a new food, sometimes that can cause stomach upset and it can cause things like vomiting or diarrhea. And so when you're changing your pet's food over, it's a good idea to take about 7 to 10 days to add the new food in to your pet's old food. And then as time moves along, remove the old food and add more of the new food. So you can do this over a period of about 7 to 10 days. And this will help ease your pet's gastrointestinal system into the new diet.
Another question that was typed in is, how do you know you're feeding your pet the right amount of food every day?
That is a great question. How do you know the right amount? Don't we all have that problem? I do, having a problem knowing how much food to put on my plate. And it's the same thing with our pets. How far do you fill that bowl and what size bowl should you have? Well, the good news is most commercially produced pet foods that are balanced for your pet will have a very handy feeding schedule on the side of the bag, side or the back of the bag. So every food is different. So I can't just tell you that every dog should have 1 cup in the morning, 1 cup at night, or 2 cups. It's going to vary according to the breed of dog, basically the size that they should be. It's going to vary according to their weight, and it's even going to vary according to their age, because what we're considering when we're feeding is all of those things and how much nutrient value is in a cup of food. So please, whatever food that you're purchasing, look at the side of the bag. There's often a range so that you can, for example, this may say feed 1/4 to 1/2 cup. There's often a range that you can work with your pet, so that if you feel like your pet is still hungry and needs a little bit more, that you can feed toward the top of the range there.
Speaking of, feeding, somebody has asked, right now their pet is on a weight loss type of diet or special food. Once they've lost the amount of weight, can they switch that food to a more natural one?
Typically, that's what we do. So if your pet is on a weight loss diet, then once your pet reaches an ideal weight, your veterinarian may decide to switch your pet to a maintenance diet food. It could be that your pet is always on a food that has restricted calories, but there are diets for pets that are good for weight loss, and then diets for pets that are good for maintenance. So one example here is Hill Science Diet WD. This is a very common food that we use for animals that are trying to watch their weight. And in addition to that, we were talking about feeding foods based on health conditions. We were talking about feeding foods based on heart conditions, weight loss. Hill's Pet Nutrition makes a variety of diets for pets with health issues. For example, if your pet has been diagnosed with kidney failure or skin disease or even liver failure or thyroid disease, there are prescription diets that your veterinarian can talk to you about that can help those conditions. So they do require a veterinarian prescription, so you can't just go purchase these. But if your pet has been diagnosed with a health condition, just like people, there may be some dietary restrictions that are important to make sure that they live a long, healthy life.
Dahlia asks, their dog doesn't have any teeth anymore. It's a little bit older pet. Is there a recommended type of diet for them, or should they, stick to wet food?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's say your pet has had to have a lot of teeth extracted because of previous dental disease and old age. And we tend to think that if a pet doesn't have any teeth, that they have to have soft food all the time. But it's not always true. So what happens is when the teeth are extracted, the gingiva or the gums become very hard and thickened, and they can actually do really well even with dry food sometimes. But if your pet is having trouble with the dry kibble, you can soften that kibble either by adding water or canned food. And certainly, if your pet is still having trouble, adding canned food or feeding solely canned food might be an option. Again, your family veterinarian can help you work through that, but you can see if your pet can still do well with dry or softened kibble.
So for dogs, that we're trying to prevent tartar buildup, does wet food affect anything, or do you want to stick to just dry food?
Very good question about feeding dry kibble versus wet food when you're trying to consider your pet's dental health. So let's say you just got your pet's teeth cleaned, because we want you to do that at least once a year. Get your pet's teeth cleaned to get all the tartar and plaque off the surface of the teeth. Dry kibble, as your pet chews, can help to mechanically break up and prevent the attachment of tartar and plaque buildup on the surface of the teeth. However, if your pet already has a lot of tartar and plaque on the teeth and calculus, then dry food doesn't necessarily remove that, and it's probably not going to be helpful. It's probably best just to go get your pet's teeth cleaned. On the flip side of that, when we're talking about canned food, sometimes we think of canned food sticking to the teeth. And certainly it's possible that little bits of moist canned food can get between the teeth much easier and kind of be harder to come out of the teeth, because we're not typically flossing our pet's teeth. But over the span of a pet's life, there really isn't any proof that canned food contributes significantly to poor dental health. But again, talk to your family veterinarian about your individual pet and see if there's a recommendation one way or the other.
A common question asked is, do dogs need raw meat in their diet?
Oh, do dogs need raw meat in their diet? They do not need raw meat. It's important for dogs and cats to get protein in their diet. They are carnivores, and they get lots of essential amino acids and omega-3 fatty acids from animal protein. But that does not have to be raw, if delivered in the raw form. There certainly are some considerations about feeding raw foods that can contribute to some health issues in our pets. And so the answer is no, your dog does not need to have raw food. They just have to have the particular nutrients that they can get from certain animal proteins.
Another question is, should my pet be on any daily vitamins or supplements?
So if you are interested in adding vitamins or supplements to your pet's diet, again, contact your veterinarian to see what it is, if anything, that your pet requires or needs. If you are feeding an already balanced diet, which is going to be true for foods like Hill's Science Diet, if you're feeding a balanced diet already, there's no necessity to add any supplements to that food. Now, unless the supplements are related to a specific health condition, for example, you may need to add a joint supplement if your pet suffers from arthritis, or you may need to add a liver supplement if your pet is suffering from liver disease. But in general, like we would take a daily vitamin, most dog and cat foods are already nutritionally balanced, and so you do not it's not required to add those supplements to your pet's food.
Similar question is it worth the effort cooking my pet chicken or rice?
Yeah. Is it worth the effort? Well, that is a very individual question. And if you have the time to prepare a homemade diet for your pet, that's something that you just have to make sure is balanced again. So you may make, something at home for your pet, but it may not have all of the essential vitamins, nutrients, amino acids that are necessary for your pet. So again, talk to your veterinarian about whether or not that's the appropriate option. You can find very, very good, balanced, commercially produced dry kibble out there that can help your pets to live long, healthy lives and without as much cooking in the kitchen.
That's a good question. When should my puppy transition to dry food?
So if you have a new puppy, maybe you've come on down to our adoption center and you found a cute little puppy and you are thinking about transitioning that puppy to dry food. Usually by the time that puppies are 6 to 8 weeks, they are able to eat dry kibble. So typically when they're weaning from their mom, we tend to put them on canned food first, but they're usually only on that for a couple of weeks before we transition them to dry food. So by about 8 weeks, I think your puppy should be fine eating dry kibble.
We see a lot in cartoons and movies, cats drinking milk or eating tuna. Should we offer that to them as a treat?
Well, let's start with milk. So ideally, we would not feed cats or dogs cow's milk because it requires a different sort of digestion. And so there is commercially available puppy and kitten milk that is formulated for the digestive tracts of those species, and I would stick to something that's been prepared for that species, because if you don't and you do feed cow's milk, sometimes it can actually lead to vomiting and diarrhea and gastrointestinal issues. So it's wonderful to see those images on TV, but in real life, sometimes that can actually contribute to health issues in our pet.
Okay, and then should rawhide bones bad for my dog?
So we want to give our pets something to chew on. It's very natural for dogs to want to chew on tough things. It keeps them busy. It's mentally stimulating. I would say if you're feeding your pets rawhides, you want to make sure that you're doing it under supervision. That's number one. If your pet is really into chewing and biting off big pieces of the rawhide, we don't want any accidents to happen to where your pet swallows a large piece of rawhide and it causes some sort of obstruction. The reason that's possible is because rawhides can take a long time to break down in the body. So those aren't going to dissolve or break down in the body over the next couple of hours. Sometimes it can take days for that to happen. So you want to make sure that it's a rawhide that's soft enough for your dog to chew off in small pieces and not swallow the whole thing. You also want to make sure that any of those treats are not hard enough to do damage to the teeth. So sometimes you can buy rawhides that are very, very hard and tough. And as your pet chews on them, sometimes it can damage the enamel of the tooth. Sometimes it can cause fractures of the tooth. And so, again, talk to your family veterinarian about what size rawhide and type of rawhide might be appropriate for your pets.
So I'm assuming the same applies to like chicken feet or the pig ears that we see in pet stores.
Exactly. So any of those other types of animal products that are used as kind of chew toys for your dogs, please run them by your veterinarian and make sure that they're not too hard or too soft or inappropriate size for the pet that you have.
Okay, what about adding probiotics to your diets?
Probiotics can be great for gastrointestinal health, particularly though if your pet is having already some gastrointestinal issue. So generally, again, a nutritionally balanced diet doesn't require any additives. But if you have a pet that already has a GI sensitivity, maybe they have diarrhea, maybe switching a diet for that pet tends to cause vomiting or diarrhea, a probiotic can certainly help to normalize the gut flora and get you on the right track to normal stool for your pet, but certainly not a requirement for every pet.
All right, good. The next question is my pet bored with the same food every day?
Is your pet bored with the same food every day? So in general, pets do not get bored with the same food. It's not impossible for that to happen. But overall, pets do fine with the same food every day. They just enjoy meal time. Pets require the nutrients in that food and not necessarily switching it up. There's also been research to show that pets have a lower number of taste buds, and so they don't necessarily need the variety that we look for as human beings. And so is it possible that they get bored with the food? It's possible, but don't feel like you need to change your pet's diet very frequently, because as we mentioned before, changing diets too frequently can actually cause some other health issues that we want to avoid.
So then what do you recommend if people want to add, egg, vegetable oil, or any other type of things to their diet?
Let's say you're wanting to change up your pet's diet for a little bit of variety, but you don't want to cause the health issues. There's a couple things that you can do. Adding treats to their food every now and then can be all right, but make sure that you are contacting your family veterinarian first to make sure that whatever you're adding is not going to cause harm to your pet, because your veterinarian is going to know whether or not your pet has allergies or sensitivities. But certainly sometimes people may scramble an egg and use that and put it in the food every now and then. Turkey and chicken breasts with no seasoning can also be a healthy treat. White rice or brown rice in small amounts can be something, a variety that you can add to the foods. But again, these should be done in moderation and certainly under the guidance of your veterinarian to make sure that there's no adverse reactions. So we hope that you adopt a pet into your family, and that when you do, you take some of the tips that you got here about how to get your pet started on a healthy and happy life, and come on down to our adoption center this weekend. And thank you again for being with us. Today, we are celebrating our 1-year anniversary, giving you information about your pets here on the Pet Podcast. You've met dozens of animals, and those animals have found wonderful homes with you in the community. And we thank you for tuning in with us. We thank you for coming down to visit Pets Like Piper. And we thank you for joining in, asking questions, and getting involved so that we can help you help your pets live together for a very, very long time. Thank you again, and we will see you next week on the Pet Pawcast. Tell them bye, Piper.